So when you're at Joe, do you order cold brew or the traditional iced coffee?
I do cold brew with like a dollop of cinnamon in it. I tell them when it's a little bit too much, when you're
Hmm.
concerned, that's the right amount. No, okay.
That's why the cinnamon budget's so
Okay,
high at that location.
nice.
I'm so sorry. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 15th episode of the Universal Podcast, where psychology intersects with other subjects. Today, we'll be talking with the founder and CEO and the vice president of coffee of the company Joe Coffee. Welcome, everyone.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Um, so first with the obvious question, you began in 2003 and now there's over 20 Joe coffee shops. Can you tell me what was sort of the motivation behind starting this company and, why coffee? Why start with this kind of thing?
Sure. I will say first that the motivation was really just to have one community coffee shop that I ran for the rest of my life. There was never a plan for it to become what it's become, which is now actually 24 locations. Although a lot of the business that we do is actually not in the cafes, it's coffee that is delivered outside of the cafes. But the plan was really nothing more than just a community gathering place. I was in a totally different business. I was actually a talent agent for actors. And when I left that, I just wanted to do something that was very different and something where I thought maybe there would be a bit of legacy and something that I would just truly enjoy going to work every day. So that was really the original, what it's become over the years, mostly because of incredible people I get to work with, like Amaris is something very, very different, but that was never really the intention. There was no strategy behind the business growing the way it did originally.
Wow. And it is surreal for going from one to over 20 now in both New York City and Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken.
Sort of. Full disclosure, we actually closed the Philadelphia ones going into the pandemic, so we haven't had those for about 5 years. But that was part of an initial attempt to grow outside of New York City that was sort of thrown off by the pandemic and is potentially back on someday. Um, but yes, that is true.
I'm knocking on wood.
Same.
Every company, whether it's a cafe or a gym or anything of the sort, they have certain atmospheres. And sometimes the atmosphere is condensed in the logo, it's in the coloring, it's in the training of the staff. McDonald's, for example, and other fast food companies utilize a lot of red and yellow because that creates a sense of urgency and quickness. Whereas Facebook uses the color blue because it pacifies us and keeps us there longer. So, how do you establish the atmosphere of Joe Coffee? Everything from training the staff to sort of match a certain vibe to the actual design of the logo to how the coffee shop works. Because I can speak from my side. I love being there and getting work done and just having some coffee. It's just a great atmosphere.
Thank you. Boy, it is done with a lot more intention now than it was originally. Again, without really having, having, first of all, never taken a business class, having never owned a business. I think a lot of it was just sort of gut. I grew up in the Midwest. I do remember very well before we opened in 2003 having a conversation with some friends about why people would come to our coffee shop as opposed to all the other coffee shops in New York City. And at the time, I'll say Starbucks was really sort of at the height of when Starbucks was looked upon as a really great culinary destination, and that idea of third place that was such a big part of their identity for so long, and one that I think they're trying to get back to now. But at the time, the question was, what could we do that was different than all the other places? And I remember talking to a friend who said something to the effect of, this is New York City. Everyone's gruff. Everyone's anonymous. When you think of going to a little shop in like Cleveland, Ohio, where I was from, you're potentially greeted by someone who knows you and they know your order and things are a little calmer. What if you did that on purpose and you had a coffee place in New York City where the staff who was there, this is what we used to say, loved both coffee and people. And that was sort of the differentiator. And even though it wasn't anything we thought would become part of a strategy long term, 22 plus years later, that is how we really start every staff training. Every time we talk about why Joe is Joe, it always seems to go back to that. It's always about the people. The coffee is excellent, and much of that is because of the third person who's on this podcast with us, our VP of coffee, who really is really our chef, among many other roles. That at this point is sort of a given, and with so many coffee shops now, that question sort of you go back to like what makes you stand out? And for us, I think a lot of it was the luck of starting with this philosophy many years ago and sort of nurturing it and making it more of really part of our outward facing and inward facing identity. Um, and then for sort of this other part you're asking about, I'd love to say that we had these, very intentional plans on the color scheme, the feel. That really wasn't it at all. It was what can we buy on the Bowery that looks cool and that speaks to the first space, which was in Greenwich Village. It's still there, I'm happy to say, on the corner of Waverly Place and Gay Street. But it also was a place that especially at that time was like the stereotypical Greenwich Village of like all actors and writers and academics and anything goes in counterculture. And so a lot of the way the shop looked originally sort of spoke to that. It was a little bit eclectic. It had brick walls, it had soft lighting, but it also had this feeling from the staff of we're individual people. We're not Starbucks employees in aprons. We wear what we wear and we have our personalities and we choose our music. But all that mattered in all of that is that all these people were nice and that they were excited about coffee and they loved people. And that is probably as deeply as I thought about it at the time because it wasn't about anything but survival, pulling together an equation that we didn't really know how to do and trying to create this amazing coffee in a city that I won't even say arguably, I will say objectively didn't have a specialty coffee scene. So there was really nothing to copy and emulate. We just kind of created it. And all those things together became who we were. And I would say as well, Amaris, I'm sure you'll agree, like exactly who we are now, 2.5 decades later.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll say this: it does very much have a very amiable feel to it, and especially the people behind the counter, to the point where when I am leaving, I feel a sort of an automatic need to say thank you to everyone and to head out. And I'm definitely not the only one, and it's I've been in there again getting work done or researching, and I've listened to in just the one by me in Long Island City to Portishead, Thievery Corporation, just some of my favorite artists playing in the background. And I've so many times I've stood up and walked up to them like, "Where are you?
Wow.
What is this playlist? Where are you getting this? Why is the music just phenomenal every time?" And they're like, "I have good music taste." And I once I asked them.
That's awesome.
Um, there was a conversation, and I mentioned that my friend is a musician, and his band is called Mars Motel. And then, like 10 minutes later, I start hearing my friend on their speaker, and I got up like, "That's so cool! That's very sweet of you to do that."
That's awesome.
It seemed like they said they enjoyed it, but I think they were just doing it to be nice, and I think also just inquisitive. Like you said, they clearly like people.
Yeah. Well, good. I mean, I'm glad that you see that. That means that the equation is working certainly where you go and the relationship between, and maybe we'll talk about this, but people meet in coffee houses oftentimes because they want to be alone, but very oftentimes because they want a place that's social. And I think in years past, you didn't really think about the staff person making your coffee as part of that equation, but they really are. And the fact that you want to say thank you and goodbye to them means somewhere there is a connection between you and those people, and you're not just, a transaction. And I think that, very much speaks to coffee being different from maybe pizza or uh, do I say matcha? Probably not. But I mean, so many other quote unquote transactional sorts of businesses
Right.
that where you actually end up having a relationship like your favorite bartender that people used to,
Exactly.
talk about when they would go Friday night to the same place. Anyway, I'm probably getting ahead of ourselves, but I'm glad to hear that that's what you that you've sort of gotten from your experiences as a customer.
Yeah, and again, I'm definitely not the only one. I've messaged you photos of, 15 of us at the communal table, and I've, there's been situations where I knew one person at the table, and by the end of it, we're all talking to one another, and like clockwork, at some point, we all just go back into our work,
Uh,
and just it becomes now it's just we're enveloped in the music again, and I don't know, there's just that I don't think that kind of thing happens accidentally, or it doesn't continue to happen accidentally, at least.
yeah. Yeah, I think there are a lot of factors that go into that kind of thing, but I'm so glad that it happens when it happens. And, for people who are watching, you'll see both of Mars and I have huge smiles on our faces. They're so sincere because we just love hearing this because I
Hmm.
think we both feel really lucky that we're doing
Hmm.
something that brings joy to people. We talk about this a lot internally as well. A lot of staff
Hmm.
talks about this again because these are not particularly high. No one's here because they want to become rich. No one's working in coffee really because they want to become rich. But there's a sense of doing meaningful work, and some of the meaningful work happens organically, and it's just, it's relationships that develop because of cafe culture.
Right, right.
I will say it's very special. That's the location I work out of the most also, the roastery cafe. I mean, the roastery in the back is where I work, but it's so special that you love it there because I do too. I think it is one of the better locations that we have, even though it's, farther afield from everybody. But I love that communal table. I have to work in the QC lab that's sort of like in glass behind the cafe wall. And so occasionally I love to look over and see what people are doing or like make eye contact with the dog or something. But seeing people interact with each other does like delight me so much. So I'll say the one thing that maybe Jonathan didn't mention that I could maybe add to this too is that like I don't think it's also not an accident that people feel good and that they can be themselves. Like I think that was part of your original philosophy, Jonathan. Obviously, like your background like representing people, like you have such a high emotional intelligence. That's been a thing that people have that we've wanted in people who've come to work at Joe. That's something
Yeah.
that we look for when we hire. It's like super, super intentional when we hire, and not just in front of house roles, but in all roles. At the roastery, we don't work front of house, obviously, but it's important because then it's easy to talk about. Okay, then how do we agree on what kind of behavior we want here? How do we treat each other well? Like, those are the things that become easy to talk about if you have people who have a certain level of emotional intelligence, not just how you do you treat your coworkers, how do you treat customers. Those are things that if people don't have emotional literacy, like you just can't expect or talk about it. And so that has been huge. And then I will say, we have invested so much time and energy internally, like certainly the last 5 years because of the pandemic. But I think the whole time I've been at Joe like 10 years, but we invest so much time and energy in how do we treat people well with our company policies, with our everything that we do, transparency, accountability, whatever it is. Like, how do we make so much of that so critical for people to see and understand so they feel good, they want to be themselves, they bring their full selves to the table, they feel seen, they feel like they can step into the work. It's not just like our work or like my green coffee buying practices, but it's like our work. How do people feel like they can belong? So that's like the work that we've done, I think, to not just say we care about inclusion, but really the work is about how do people feel like they belong and can actively show up and participate in the work. We put a lot of effort into that. And I think that is definitely not by accident. And you and your sister, Jonathan, I think have like it comes natural to you. It does not come natural to other people. So especially when you're a company of our size, 300 plus people or something, you have to like have a structure for it. So it's like part of people's vocabulary and expectation. And and yeah, we spend a lot of time on that. And that I think contributes to like as much of the look and vibe as the space, the physical stuff.
Yeah, and
Right.
without taking the conversation another direction, then we can certainly move on. It's very nice of you to give me and my sister, I should have mentioned, I started the company. We were a family business. It was my sister and I. She was an opera singer at the time, and she's still with us now. She runs all of our catering and special events, which is a surprisingly giant 1,500 or so event a year business. But initially it may have come from us, but what happens over the years is as the organization develops with the kinds of people who share your really your value system, I guess, your priorities, especially as those who started the company potentially have a larger age gap with the rest of the staff, it spreads to where it just is the culture of the company. It wouldn't change one bit if I left tomorrow. It has been sort of carried on in this internal way that now comes from many, many people. And it's just the way we view the way that we want to do business. And I hope very much that when I'm gone from Joe, which will happen at some point soon, um, that's not going to change. And I absolutely don't think that it will, because there are people now to carry forward who understand it much more so than I do at this point.
You've made it so integral in its inception that it's been cemented. So no matter what's built on top of that foundation, that's still the core foundation.
Sure. Thank you. Yes. Thanks.
Yeah,
I give,
that's
yeah,
great.
thank you. Thank you. Much more credit to many other people. I'm really the lucky one, but yes, I'll take it.
So we've mentioned the pandemic, I think, twice now. So let's actually jump into that. You know, so the WEF, the World Economic Forum, I believe, estimated that about 34% of businesses shut down during the pandemic. The New York City Comptroller mentioned that 2,800 small businesses closed by July 2020. So that's not a very long time into the pandemic. In other words, there was plenty of pandemic left to sort of exacerbate the situation. Would you say that this was sort of this social intelligence that's incorporated in Joe Coffee? Would you say that that is the primary reason why you've been able to sort of survive through this tribulation that other organizations weren't able to survive through?
I mean, I think that was part of it, certainly. Many of the coffee companies that are our size and have similar businesses survived as well. I mean, there is, also such a thing as scale. And I think that while it was happening, and, that was, to be clear, obviously the worst thing that we've ever been through, although we came out of it way stronger than we went into it. We're a very different company. We're diversified in a way that would survive something like that, again, potentially in a way that I don't think just having cafes would, which is really what we were going into the pandemic. And so probably there was some thoughtfulness and, humility, behind the decisions we had to make at the time. How are we going to get people paid? Who was going to have to stop working for a while? How are we going to bring people back? How we were going to serve our people the quote unquote nourishment of coffee. There isn't, but it's, I mean, and and all those things probably helped helped keep us in business. But I also would say, don't let's not kid ourselves. Many people lost their jobs and didn't come back. Locations closed that are not there anymore. Like, lots of bad still happened, but we survived it and we are stronger now than we were beforehand. I'd like to think that, we did things as humanly as we could, but we also made business decisions to keep the business alive, just like anybody would have to do in that kind of crisis. I mean, I had one role at Mars's was very different than mine at that point. We were sort of looking after different things, but yeah, I mean, Mars, maybe you can speak more to that, but sure, that was, thank you for noting that. I don't think that was any more intentional, that it's just our DNA.
Yeah, I think we did. We did shoulder a big burden. I mean, I think like everybody's like the world uncertainty like blew up. I think individuals uncertainty blew up. A lot of the care that we took for people was even like leading, I would say even leading up to it, there was so much that we didn't know and nobody knew. Like I remember I was on a work like we have this monthly HQ meetings. This was like maybe in February or something. I was on a call because I was at the roastery, so I was like joining virtually or something like that. And one of the staff members like at the roastery like came up to me like literally in tears, being just like, what is going on? I don't know how comfortable I feel coming to work anymore. Like I don't know what's happening. And I remember feeling in that moment like that's what made it feel like, okay, something is about to blow up that we don't understand. And nobody knew anything, obviously. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like Jonathan said, I had a very different experience. We did keep the roastery open throughout, even though we closed all of our locations. So me and a couple of other production people, like we worked throughout. So like our care for each other, being on the empty streets of New York to get to work, that was a different thing altogether. So I think concept of like what is essential, what is the value here, like what is valuable about the work that I do. We all went through that existential crisis together at the roastery. I think that's what helped us at the roastery stay really tight. Like we went through that experience together. We and the roastery, we have people who've been there many many years. Like we have a lot of long-term employees, so that was, I
Yeah.
think, really important for us and our relationships with each other. That has helped us stay strong through many other, we've gone through many other challenges in the last 5 years too. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, I feel like the world kind of had a like psychological contract that broke and had to get rebuilt, and food
Yeah.
service was at the forefront. So I don't know that it was just coffee in our businesses, but I think
Essential
especially in New
workers.
York, yeah, like New York is a food driven city. That was a really powerful thing, I think, for all of us to feel a part of. Because I think in coffee, especially specialty coffee, we often feel very niche and different. And like you were saying at the top, Jonathan, like we're not pizza or whatever, but like I think we felt so much more in tune with the greater industry struggling, and that felt kind of good. But yeah, it
Yeah.
was a
Though I
bizarre,
will
bizarre time.
say, you know, joking, not joking, I think if you were to poll 100 people at the beginning of the pandemic and say, what do you need delivered to your house? What can't you live without? Coffee would be on almost probably the top five of like almost every one of those lists. So we were also working with a product that was like again, like bringing happiness, and people needed, even though they didn't need it. It was like, you must eat food to survive. You don't have to drink coffee, but it was so important to people. And whether it was just keeping up one ritual or being able to control it, or, or again, having something that we haven't even talked about this, but just tastes incredible and people love, it put us in like in a kind of an interesting, I don't know, an interesting position. I mean, we felt in some ways like we were doing even, I wouldn't say better, more important work, but
The
like
Lord's
we sort
work.
of, I do remember having moments of being like, wow, like we're essential workers, like it's coffee. And then you realize that, like, again, this is also something that people are thinking about as they're hunkered down in their apartments. Like it's probably what the hell am I going to do tomorrow? How am I going to get my coffee this first day we can't go outside?
We did also donate quite a lot of coffee to hospitals, and we did donate a lot, and that felt really good. Like loads of people, telling us, and that was actually something that we did to keep our people in work, like the people at the
Yeah.
roastery. It's like, okay, we can brew coffee into like Joe to go boxes. We even like put like cold brew in jars. So we could grind coffee. Like we were like, what can we do to keep these people employed? And we donated tons and tons and tons of that coffee to people who are working in the medical field in New York City, and that did feel really good. I think we all felt really like we are doing the Lord's work. We're not operating on anybody, but we're contributing. That felt good.
I mean, I have to say, thank you, obviously, because that's amazing. I mean, uh, uh, I have to push back though. John, you mentioned that coffee isn't necessarily nourishment. I'm gonna have to disagree. I mean, I don't think I would be able to grade it the way I grade or do as much as I could possibly do without coffee. And that's not like a anything about addiction, but other than like it's something that is a nice, very controllable dopamine rush, and it just is so sociable. And
Yeah.
another thing that's super important, John T. Cacioppo, who is a psychologist studying, he passed away kind of recently, who was studying loneliness, was trying to explain this theory that when you don't eat enough, the biologic need is hunger. That's what you feel, that deprivation. With not drinking, you have thirst. He argued that there was also a social component, and that loneliness was a biologic deprivation that has long-term and immediate consequences that are detrimental. And now there's been a bunch of different studies that have essentially validated it, from people who've been locked in solitary confinement, how their suicidality is so much higher, how people who are chronically lonely are significantly more vulnerable to the same diseases and illnesses that we would be able to move through should we have some sort of social stimulus. So even the fact that when the physical shop isn't necessarily available to people at the very height of the pandemic, the fact that you thought of a way to sort of reformulate everything, not just to give workers something to do, which is in and of itself something important, the idea of having meaning, especially in a time where everything felt not meaningless, but undefined. So it's hard to make meaning in things that are so deeply undefined. But also to the people that you were providing this to. I mean, as much as we banged on the pots and pans at 7 o'clock during the changeover shift, one of my best friend is in the medical field, and I mean, I would always tell him like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay?" And definitely annoyed him with that. But the idea is, I mean, it was just something where I think getting a cup of coffee from a very neighborhood like coffee shop specifically out of a thank you for doing this, for saving lives repeatedly, where your life might be in jeopardy too, because again, there were many times where we had no idea, and not just in the first wave, of course. I mean, we all remember that it was vicissitudinous. Sometimes we thought we were good, and as a teacher, we went back in several times and then back out, and that just exacerbated the sense of not having a definition. So thank you for that. But I do think that from the actual coffee rush to the actual coffee shop, there is immeasurable nourishment.
I'll take that. Listeners, if you
Yeah, I
haven't
agree.
started drinking coffee, www.
Be nourished today. Stop by your.
Right.
So we spoke about a lot of the sort of the internal components of Joe Coffee. Let's zoom out to sort of the locations. So there's the adage of real estate: location, 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 which is more than a century old. What goes into deciding where exactly you want to situate a Joe Coffee, from foot traffic to train proximity to what the vibe of the district or the corner of the district is? What goes through your mind to establish this is the place?
I guess what I would say is, first of all, it just has to feel good. Like, it has to feel good. Foot traffic to us on a place like Broadway on the Upper West Side, where we flat out failed, didn't mean a thing because it just didn't feel good. So whether or not that's one of my special gifts, although I have gotten this wrong many times, but I can walk into a space usually and I just say like, this will work, or I'll just say like, it may, all the data points may line up, it just doesn't. Something feels wrong. The ceilings, the light, whatever it is. If it passes that sort of a test for the first 15 plus years, nothing went into it but, God. I mean, the very simple checklist, exactly as you say, of like, you have to make sure, we're a volume business, first of all. I mean, our average sale now is around, a little over $7, but for many years it was less than $4. And you have to have many hundreds of transactions a day for the business itself to work. So for us, we're looking for activity in the morning, because we do a very large percentage of our business before 10 o'clock. That's just the nature of coffee shops. And if you don't have that business, the equation just doesn't work. And we've seen that a couple of times where perhaps we've opened in a clothing store that opens at 11 and it just does not work. So we needed there to be activity in the morning. We needed to make sure there was some sort of commerce and residential and transportation and a good cross-section of like all types of New Yorkers. And part of the reason I say that is one of our I wouldn't say it's our mission, but like our position in the world of coffee is like, we're very accessible. We're sometimes thought of as like a stepping stone between Dunkin' and Starbucks and, $50 a pound geisha coffees. We are not a pretentious like coffee company where you need to walk in and have tattoos and like know that an Americano or macchiato is defined as this versus the caramel macchiato at Starbucks. It's just not us. And so, and price point too, although that's become more and more difficult, we always place ourselves a little bit below sort of like the competition of specialty coffee. And we wanted to attract definitely not just like the elite coffee drinkers, the coffee snobs. So that was something that was sort of important to us as well. And then, you kind of just like feel the people, the neighborhood, you look at competition. I mean, these are things that are like so incredibly obvious, but what we didn't use were data points. And that didn't really start until our current COO, who is also our our longest employee, he started, I love this, my favorite story, but his name is Lee Harrison. He's the greatest thing ever. And he started on his 18th birthday, the day we opened our second store in 2005. So he's worked for us for over 20 years. Literally every profession I mean, every position in the company. And
So
now
most of his life.
yeah. Yeah, and interestingly, he was working in coffee before that for a couple years as like a kid living upstate New York. I think he started when he was 14. But he's brilliant, and he is the one who I would say runs the company, and very closely with Amaris really now are like the establishers and carriers of culture, of like the way that we do things internally. Where was the story? Anyways, when he came in, when he was promoted and started, being part of the C-suite or whatever you call us, he had us think about things very differently, to really dig into data, to understand the way bigger companies make decisions. And for many years, we didn't even think about that. And part of the reason is we never failed. Now we fail sometimes, but New York coffee was so different before the pandemic that anytime we opened a store, it was like a smash. Our big thing for many years, was pioneering neighborhoods. You can't do that anymore, but we were first to most neighborhoods in New York, maybe our first 10. I mean, there's many more neighborhoods than 10, but like the first to the Upper East Side, the first to the Upper West Side, the first to Chelsea, the first to Midtown, all those things before all of our friendly competitors were part of the world. So we didn't really have to think about things the same way, but that is very different now, to a point where we've met recently with one of the really big real estate companies about hiring them and paying them a ton of money to help us identify where we want to be, which years ago would have been laughable to me, but we've made mistakes. Things have not worked. It's harder and harder to take risks. And so we can't make a mistake at this point in our business, still, really digging out of the pandemic. So we have to rely on really professionalized data now. But I'll still go back to there is a feeling. It's just a feeling. And
I have to say, Malcolm Gladwell,
one of our first regulars, yeah, was coming
really,
in. I made his coffee for years. Soy latte to stay. Yes.
that is wild. Well, uh, Malcolm Gladwell, fantastic writer and researcher, and you can tell that he's the son of a psychotherapist and an economist. You can just tell that he has that this or mathematician. You have this idea that these things have fused very well in his mind. In his book Blink, I mean, one of the ideas is that you're given this particular, if you've developed specialty or mastery in a particular field, sometimes you have the answer before you know you have the answer. There is this, I mean, our subconscious, I don't mean this in like some sort of like hippy dippy way. I mean like measurable subconscious is so powerful and so much more powerful than the minute focal points of our consciousness. He speaks about how sometimes a master painter or someone who deals in paintings can spot a fake before they have even the beginning of any sort of semblance of how to articulate how they know that it's fake, but they know it's fake. And I think, one can dismiss, oh yeah, it's just the vibes, like they're just going off of vibes. But if you have spent a good portion of your life sort of being in places and sort of appraising the atmosphere or vibes, then you do sort of develop this indirect mastery of being able to sense what works and what doesn't. And all these variables that you might not even have names for until you have that consultant come in. You don't have names for these data points. You just know, well, when this happens and that happens, this might happen and then that doesn't work. But when this happens and this happens, this, for some reason, there's alchemy to this. That's vibes just fragmented into data points.
That's fascinating. Had absolutely never thought about it, but as you talked about it, that really hits home. That's very interesting.
But some people hear that and they think, oh, okay, I'm going to just go off of vibes on everything. It's like, no. Mastery is the important part. You have to go through the motions many times before there's that almost automaticity of reception.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I think that's sort of like part of like artisanship or like artistry. Like we talk about that a lot in coffee, that like, that's the whole big thing about specialty coffee, right? That it's skilled labor. That's like the thing that I think has often distanced us from the rest of the food service industry, is that a lot of people don't think. I'm not saying this because like I'm like bitter or anything, but like, a lot of people don't see it as skilled labor. But being a barista and being a coffee roaster, like these are really like really highly developed, highly honed skills. And that like now, as I don't know how many hours of roasting I've done in my lifetime, like I mean it feels like billions, right? Like I know if something is wrong or not. And sometimes I'm like, oh, it's because the machine sounds differently, so I can tell that something is different that's happening than normal. Or like you just know, you build those like all you things you said. And I think like that is something that like so many people should be more aware of with the skill set that they have, that is like a master, like comes from a place of mastery, not just like, oh, it's a gut or like an instinct. Like it's not following a gut. You have the mastery of it. I feel like that's sort of like part of the creative confidence that a lot of people don't have.
If it weren't a skill based trade, then every single cup would taste the same from the same roast. It would always be the same. And that's certainly not the case at all. And this, I guess, kind of leans into this. We're zooming in even more now to what goes into deciding a good coffee bean. Like I know you have some what's the word? You have certain processes and parameters that you set. Like we're going to foreground these sort of initiatives. But let me ask you, just to let us know, what goes into, what are the primary and maybe even secondary, we'll call it priorities for deciding where you're going to get your coffee from and how you're going to, which beans you're going to choose, whether it's elevation, whether it's certain industry practices from the people who are essentially sourcing them and things of that sort.
Well, I'll say like maybe I'll put my like Joe hat on first and say, to answer the first thing that you said, because I think you're saying two separate things. Like the concept of what is good. This is something that I think the industry spends a lot of time talking about. I think as Joe, like we do have things that we love that we think are objectively good quality, but I think like a lot of our mission is not to say like what you like isn't good or what we like is better. I think like the concept of applying value to what is good is a little bit of a tricky thing, because coffee is so nostalgic and it is so culturally rooted, and it's so dependent on the family you're from, the country you're from, that is like your good can be your good, and that's good.
Right.
We do try very hard not to say what is good. I think like I have a lot of certifications. I have a lot of like I've spent time on my sensory skill set, so I can talk about objective qualities with an experience.
Just very quickly, so
But just
so so the viewers know and can learn a little bit.
yeah.
Can you tell us what these are, just so
Oh,
we
sure.
can learn a little bit with you?
Yeah. No, but just to kind of preface everything I'm about to say with like I do try to resist, like coming from a Central American family where the coffee that I grew up with, I know now is objectively not as good, probably, as, the industry standards would have it. I still don't think that's bad. And so I think I just want to be a little bit careful with talking about good, and then in kind of objective terms. But okay, so in coffee, we have a certification called a Q grader certification. You can become a Q grader, get certified by taking the Q. That's like our version of a sommelier. We don't have like all the different levels of a sommelier, but it is a really rigorous course that involves something like 21 tests. Q, like the letter Q,
Yeah.
which is a
And
letter.
Amaris, you are only Q grader right now, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Q
Yeah.
certified. We've had two. I mean, it is very difficult, just to
Yeah.
just to be clear.
Yeah. It's difficult. It costs a lot. People fail. The fail.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wouldn't
The
pass
fail
it
rate is
also,
very
truly.
high.
You must have certain qualities. Like I don't have a great sense of smell. I would absolutely never be able to, which is, again, is fine at this point in the business, but it is a incredibly rigorous training and difficult. I think, yeah, I mean, yeah, you had to really work. Yeah,
It's a honed skill. Yeah. You have to
yeah.
work hard at it. You have to practice a lot. And you also have to stay calibrated. So to maintain your certification, you have to go every certain amount of years to retake everything, so you're not out of calibration with the standard. It's our industry regulates that in a way so that there is an objective standard that people can look to, which I think is fair. A lot of industries have that. So, being a Q grader, yes, like we do have a scoring system. Coffee, for it to be scored, specialty coffee has to be 80 points and above. It is different than wine. I think because that's like the thing that we're calibrated against. It's not just your palate. You're calibrated against your skills are measured so that you can assign a numerical score to the sensory qualities that you're like the characteristics that are present in that coffee. However, that is sort of the quality standard for green or like raw coffee. So that scoring rubric doesn't apply for all the different kinds of roast levels and things that are out there. They're about like the objective inherent characteristics that have no influence by roast. So for Joe, we started first with the products that we basically started with our own menu that we want to have. So we have our own product definitions. So these are the coffees that we want to put out there in the world. And for us, that is a little bit of a mix of like accessible in flavor quality and price. So like those are the first things that we say, like these are the things that we want to present to the world. And then when we're sourcing coffee, we also add a values system to that, because the role that we play as a roasting company in the world of coffee, we take that responsibility really seriously. Coffee is an agricultural product, but it's not a commodity product. And yet coffee is traded on like the commodities, like in the stock exchange. So there's this really bizarre thing that happens in specialty coffee where like we're beholden to participate in what I think is like an outdated and historic trading structure, but the thing that we're trading and buying is not a true commodity, because it's not interchangeable with each other. Like you said, one cup of coffee is not the same universally, right? So we know that it is a thing of quality, and yet the way that we purchase it is very different. And the reason that exists is because of centuries of forced labor, slavery, really, really, horrible systems of exploitation related to colonialism. Those are not like new or invented just when the stock exchange, the stock market like came about. These are really, really, really long historical inequitable practices. We cannot operate in a system of trade. We're not just a New York based company. Coffee doesn't grow in the United States. It's not just a US company. So we have to be really mindful all the things that go into how we source coffee. There's a lot of power dynamics and a lot of icky stuff that we kind of have to face. So when we're sourcing coffee, it isn't actually just about sourcing the right ingredient, like a culinary, like Jonathan was saying, like a chef. That is part of it for sure, sourcing the right ingredient for the product that we want to put out there in the world. But it comes with so much more. So good quality coffee is like the given. All the other stuff, like talking about values, how do you ensure people are being paid fairly? How do you ensure that you have honest communication with someone when it's a buyer's market? Like those are things that are really difficult that we engage with, that I think are even more of an issue than quality. But yes, we have a lot of standards for quality, and we do, I think, pretty good work on that front too. That obviously I think can be perceived in the cafes.
Without a
Yeah.
doubt. I know also, I mean, I think you have a principle for from whom you source the coffee too. If I'm not mistaken, you primarily source from women-owned industries, I believe.
So it's not like primary in terms of volume, because one of the things we've learned actually through setting a goal to prioritize gender equity
Mhm.
is that expressions of gender equity are different everywhere. So there are many people who perceive their business to be a family business or like a cooperative business. Like the role of the cooperative in coffee production is really important. I think they have a powerful role to play to advocate for smallholder producers. The majority of the world are smallholder producers, by the way. Very, 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 very small producers. So we have learned that we don't always know what we don't know. So it's hard to say that the majority are women produced
If
or
it's a
women owned,
family that
because
shares ownership in this for a long time,
yeah.
like it's harder to
Hmm.
calibrate what exactly
Or
that would mean.
cooperative. Yeah.
Right.
That
That makes
doesn't
sense.
necessarily mean gender equity doesn't exist there.
Right.
But it is very important to be clear that, yeah, ownership of land and farms and stuff in the supply chain. Like women are not typically included in a lot of those, like historically. So that is something, that's why we pay a lot of attention to that. But yeah, we do. I think women are good collaborators. That's how we sort of started to see, like, okay, if we prove that we care about collaboration, like women are more likely to have that, interest, so we can have the same values and do that work together. Um, but that we do prioritize like people that we can speak to regularly, people that we can have a good feedback loop with, whether that's about QC or anything else throughout the year. It's not just at the moment of transaction. Those are the types of people that we choose to work with. A lot of them happen to be women. And we've learned a lot about gender equity and intersectionality like through working with a lot of these women.
Also, just of note, um, the relationships with the either co-ops or the farms specifically are long-term relationships. We very much don't want to change our producers every year. I mean, it's great to give chances to others, but there are families who we've worked with. What our relationships are well more than 10 years now. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
sort of its
Hmm.
own ecosystem there as well, with responsibilities on each side as well. And looking at the sort of longevity as well of that farm, that land, is a really big part of what we do. I think people assume like you buy coffee from all different importers and different farms in different countries all the time, 15 a month. Not at all. Like our list is actually pretty short. They're just deeper relationships, and it's just a much better way, I think, to work in this, in that part of the supply chain.
Yeah, that also just solves a lot of other issues like
Yeah.
just
So many.
trustworthiness, knowing where you're getting
Yeah.
it from.
And they really feel like partners.
Yeah.
Truly, they truly are. And I think they feel that way as well, by the way. I mean, we get, super great, cute, like communications with them, videos. And when we get together, like, they're very proud, I think, of this relationship in particular, even though we're very small. But yeah, I mean, I hope that we're working with a lot of these, 10 years from now. I assume that we will be.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, we don't shop around, and I think there is a
No.
lot of power in that. Like, there's loyalty on our side, and like I said, it is a buyer's market. Like the buyers do determine so much in coffee, and this is a way of showing that we're here, we're around for the long run. That's why, like, it does take us a while if we wanted to start a new partnership with somebody because we're growing or because we're starting a new product or we're adding something to the menu. We take our time to be intentional about starting who we're going to work with for that because we're not likely to walk away anytime soon. And that does also mean it opens us up to hard conversations because we're not going to just walk away. Like we've had some of those over the years, like, why aren't you paying more? Those moments where we really do have to engage with a lot of the big stuff, like the really big conversations, like talking about uncertainty during the pandemic. My God, like there was a lot of that for all the people who produce coffee all over the world, and sometimes even worse cases because, like, their governments, like, they're beholden to whatever their governments were doing at the time. So those are all things that, like, if you're really in it, I do remember feeling like so emotionally exhausted that year, not because of Joe, but like I was like, all these people all involved in the business that we do, that, like, there's nothing I can do, except just talk to them. And I did, like, my mom joked, she was like, it feels like you guys are going through a moment where, like, everybody is each other's therapist. And I was like, that's the only thing we can do right now to support each other, is hear each other talk. But yeah, those are things that I think are really important to Joe that go into making our coffee so
Right.
good.
And I mean, unfortunately, it's just not that it's just the case, but it's the harsh reality that there's a huge portion of the world right now that is struggling for so many different reasons. I was at a conference yesterday, and um, one of the things that was mentioned, I believe it was the former president of Mexico that was speaking, and he mentioned that there was 135 million people that were displaced in the last year, and that's just or in the last few years, and it's crazy to imagine that you think we would be pretty good at figuring out the biggest problems, but there's a consistent recurrence of them, and they sometimes take different names, slightly different veils, but it is surreal that there's so many different difficulties with, and these surface when you're establishing a business that requires sort of international partnerships. You learn things that perhaps you wouldn't have should it have been domestic the entire time.
Yeah, that's why, like, I always, we have this thing that we do every month called Joe 101, where we have, like, orientation for new employees. I like to say a lot that like coffee is so political. You don't, I don't, you don't, it isn't an opinion. Like it just is, it's internationally traded. We are so impacted by what our government does. The people who grow coffee are so impacted by what their government does. Like there are so many there's not a way for us to operate outside of politics in coffee, but it is like a lot of psychology too, like we have to really understand how people make choices, like what are the constraints on how they manage their businesses, or like culturally what is impacting like how they're speaking to us about certain things. Like there's so much that goes into the work that we do that it's like I think the most widely social like impact industry for companies who aren't even like nonprofit.
Yeah. Um, I, it's also surreal that coffee coffee is not like wine, in that wine has been around for, from what we understand, from about 6,000 years, from first one discovered in Armenia, of course, in the Areni caves in, I believe was it 4,000 BC. And same thing with beer. There's traces of beer that's also around that era. Coffee, from my understanding, coffee is only about 500, 600 years old in terms of consumption. No, it's not. Oh, tell me.
Well,
Think
this
it,
is what's really tricky. So this is another reason why I think wine and those things are very different, because the reason I don't think people noticed coffee is that like I do so I am of the school of thought. I think coffee originated in Ethiopia, and I don't
Mhm.
think people were paying attention to or cared about what was happening in Africa until, I don't know, not that long ago, really, in the history of the world. So I think coffee has been around a lot longer. We just don't really have a lot of record of it. I think we have this like cute story of Kaldi the goat herder, who was part of the Oromo
Yeah.
people, who's like the largest ethnic group in Ethiopia. Like that's great, that's cute. I'm sure that's probably not incorrect.
And the goats crushing the beans, right? That myth, yeah, or story, or
I think the myth is like they were chewing the leaves of the tree. They got really excited because leaves have caffeine content
yeah.
in them also. It's like a plant response. But I just think that the world didn't care.
Mm.
Like, I don't really think, I think this is a really huge thing related to like the erasure of the identity of people, and like just probably a lot of racism. Like, no one cares what happens in countries where there's a lot of black and brown
Mm.
people. I don't, and I'm not saying that's a reason
Until you can
to care.
extract
Yeah.
the labor, extract the what do you call the resources?
Yeah. So like we know that like Ethiopia occupied Yemen in like whatever, like 500 AD or something like that, like, and took coffee there. I mean, that's like what we know, and that's like maybe the beginning of coffee, but like that's pre forced labor. So the history of coffee pre forced labor, it's just not really, that doesn't exist. We have a history
Hmm.
of like post forced labor of coffee because we know that dark side, and that started with the Dutch, really. So like that's the history of coffee that we really know. That's the dark stuff. But that's I don't know that that's the full story. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, if we then zoom out to the idea of like mass production and mass consumption, wine has been mass consumed for a while, and so too has beer and many other drinks, tea, for example. My question then is about the consumption of coffee. Caffeine is obviously a drug. It has effects, just like, I mean, sugar has effects, nicotine has effects. All of these things have different effects on us every year. And the reason why I'm mentioning sort of the novelty of caffeine is or of coffee is because it has the least amount of data, or time of data, the least amount of time in which you can do cross cultural studies, of longitudinal studies, etc. So yet every maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years, there's a new opinion about, you have to drink this much coffee, or avoid coffee at all costs, or like, did you not drink coffee today? You're going to be aging. Like, there's so many different, or I forgot one of them that I read, as I was, because I wanted to know what are all the strangest things that have been said. Some of them were like, coffee masks are the new thing, where you put on like a mask of actual like grounded, like a paste of coffee. I don't know if it's working right now. Uh, but yeah, so there's so many different ideas about how caffeine affects us. I want to know from two individuals who are surrounded by caffeine, what are your thoughts on caffeine consumption, maybe personally or globally?
So I have a teenage daughter, and when she was little, like the mantra in the house was just everything in moderation. We talk about sugar and staying up or whatever, everything in moderation, everything in moderation. And that's how I feel about coffee. If it works for your body, if it doesn't work for your body, you should not. I have followed because it has. I don't know if it's really affected our business, but you would think it would, or it's affected the industry, like the years that you hear coffee's great for you and the years that you hear coffee's terrible for you. And definitely earlier in the business, there was much more chatter about the negative effects of caffeine on the body than I think we've been hearing for many years now, especially if you're talking about caffeine as opposed to necessarily what you would consume from a Starbucks. Then we're talking about nutrition. But if you're talking about caffeine specifically, I think that science has definitely seems to be leaning towards all of the benefits and very few of the consequences in moderation if it works for your body. But luckily, I used to worry that it was really like, oh, something's coming next year. We're going to find out this terrible. But at this point, I don't really worry about that. I mean, yeah.
And what about you, Amaris? How do you sort of conceptualize caffeine consumption, coffee?
You're right that it's like everywhere now. My family loves to get me like, I don't know, eye creams and whatever that have like green coffee extract or like caffeine in them because they literally are everywhere. And all beauty products and stuff. But I don't know. I feel like the FDA does not regulate it. So there is no like standard on what is the acceptable amount of caffeine in a cup of coffee. So that's what makes all these studies and everything possible. They regulate like everything else. It's insane, and they don't regulate caffeine. So I don't really know. There's just like I think that ends up helping send a mixed message to people and lets people who have like fear mongering tactics come in. Usually I chalk it up to like a lot of the extreme messaging. It's just like all marketing. People should be in touch with their own bodies and know what they can handle. Like we have people on our team who don't drink that much coffee because they know they're sensitive to it and want to be productive, healthy people at work. I don't know. It's such a hard one. It's really like a difficult one. I do know that I love that I have had a lot of pregnant women in my life, and so like good decaf I think should taste really good because there's so many people who like the taste of coffee but don't want caffeine. So I'm a big fan of decaf for that
Yeah.
reason. I think coffee can taste good, caffeine or no caffeine. I'm not anti no caffeine. I like the flavor of coffee.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think the love of coffee, sure, caffeine is a part of it, but when we think about that sort of romantic notion of people sitting, reading at a cafe or whatever, whether or not they're drinking something caffeinated is really irrelevant to what coffee
Right,
culture is,
right.
which would lead us, if we had another hour, to talking about the most important thing in coffee, which is matcha. Iced strawberry matcha, I should
Okay,
be
so we're getting
specific.
to my
Uh,
last question, and first, thank you for all this
you.
insight. This has been fantastic. This is actually my penultimate question. I do have one after. Um, so the question is, New York City. Speaking of caffeine and being, very alert and focused, and also like fast paced and but without relinquishing concentration. New York City is a breakneck city. It is one in which you're constantly moving, constantly doing a multitude of things. So many of my friends have more than one job, and I think it's because of New York City. I'm not talking about necessarily the price of living here, which is a whole nother vector to all of this, which is extremely important. But I'm just talking about sort of the mindset, the mind state of a New Yorker. And I mean, when I'm in my homeland of Armenia, I'll be walking down an avenue, and there's a real story. It was, I think, 2011 or 2012. My friends texted me and they said, "Is everything okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." Why? And like, we saw you just like racing down Northern Avenue, and I was like, I was walking to get breakfast and like reflecting, I am walking way past every single person just because I am geared as a New Yorker. I just walk significantly faster. And when my New York friends are in Armenia as well, they have the same sort of idea. So all of this kind of telescopes to my question, which is, as a New Yorker, what sort of rituals do you think exist in the coffee culture? And what rituals do you follow, including what is your go-to order?
My ritual is sort of the opposite of what my business is based on. I wake up, I make myself 1 cup of coffee. I drink it black. It's almost always the same coffee. That's my
Okay.
ritual. It's just my favorite Joe coffee, which is from the Guarnizo family in Colombia. And I just very quietly sit with that cup. It has to be a mug, obviously, truly. And I don't really look at my phone or talk to anyone. I love it. It's my moment. Yeah. And for years upon years upon years, um, the ritual of New York City cliche, which is also, proven by the number of transactions that we and other coffee places do, is that coffee in a cardboard cup is just, that's New York as well. It has been for a long time. It's that same energy. It's coffee on the go, and it's lovely when people sit down quietly at a cafe, and they definitely do. But if you watch, primarily, if you were just sort of like watching traffic of a cafe, you're still looking in the morning at 80+% of the people walking out with something in a paper cup. And that's usually their ritual. I think that's what they choose to do, because if they wanted to do it a different way, they probably would, especially now, because the convenience of having good coffee outside of the cafe is something that is tremendously different than it was a couple years ago. The technology of different ways of serving coffee without having to have barista skill has changed, but luckily they're still coming in for that sort of idea of like standing in line is just kind of part of their day, grabbing. And also, let's not forget, like, the most important thing that goes back to the beginning of our conversation, the moment of connection with the person that is making their coffee.
Yeah, we have so many regulars. Like I feel like I don't even work at the cafes anymore. I haven't worked in the cafes in like 10 years. But I know so many stories about regulars because I know I'm friends with the, baristas and people who work at Joe. And there's people who've been longtime customers. Even like, okay, so I do customer support too for like our online store. And we have people who have been longtime regulars at Joe and then moved to Long Island, or like moved with their family to wherever, or like moved back home to wherever they were originally from before living in New York for many years. And so like I get often emails like saying, "Thanks for the coffee. Like it reminds me of when I was a student at NYU and standing in that." Like there's so many really great. I think people love that ritual. They love coming into hard cafes, and I love that. I even love being on the subway going to work and seeing people like holding cups of Joe coffee in their hand, because we have like the like a blue cardboard cup. Oh, I love it. I think that makes
It's
me
such a signature color too.
Yeah.
feel so good. And I've never been that weirdo who's like, I made that coffee happen, like, but I've always want to like
But you did. But you
yeah,
did.
but oh, I just love it. That brings me like no like small amount of joy. It just is so so good. I love to see that out in the world. And I'm similar to Jonathan. I make my own cup of coffee for myself every day. I don't have a caffeine kind of problem or threshold. Like I do drink a lot of coffee because I'm cupping a lot of coffee and doing like QC and stuff throughout the world, like during the day. But I always make myself a cup of coffee. Like my thing in the morning is like the house is completely dark. I don't turn on any lights until like after I brushed my teeth, but I'll like go feed my dog because he has to have breakfast first or he's insane, and put water in my kettle to make my coffee in the dark, and and then I go about my day. Like that's just I have to do it. It's like or I can't wake up. And I love the ritual of making coffee. It's just so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
I
drink it black
mine
too.
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask you what's yeah. So mine is also black coffee. I typically have iced coffee just because I have a thing about coffee touching my teeth, or really anything touching my teeth that's potentially staining it. My stepmom's a dentist, so that's a part of it. Though she drinks coffee all the time and hot coffee, and I don't know why I've established this for myself, but I break this rule all the time. But when I can, I have iced coffee, and it's always black coffee, and I always put cinnamon in it, powdered cinnamon, because it's something that's anti-inflammatory,
Wow.
almost in a
That's cool.
and don't really sleep too much, not because of the coffee, just because of what I do. I'm almost in a perpetual state of inflammation, so you're helping me fight that war with my cinnamon dousing, of which there's a tremendous amount sometimes.
Whoa,
Yeah,
that's crazy.
but it's so
Wait,
good.
do you do so when you're at Joe, do you order cold brew or the traditional iced coffee?
I do cold brew with like a dollop of cinnamon in it. I tell them when it's a little bit too much, when you're
Hmm.
concerned, that's the right amount. No, okay.
That's why the cinnamon budget's
Okay,
so high at that location.
nice.
I'm so sorry. Okay, so I guess I did have one final question, which is basically like if one were to establish not necessarily a coffee shop, but if one were to establish some sort of um, something in the restaurant industry, and they were looking to start today, or I guess when they watch this, what would be the and from both of you, what would be the number one advice that's perhaps flexible or adaptable enough to fit whether they're going to be making a bubble tea or a steakhouse or something of the sort, anything that's in essentially the food and dining services. What would you say is the number one piece of advice that you think is just critical for entering that industry?
I mean, I'll say, assuming the product is good, so I'm putting that aside. Uh, just
Right.
establishing community as quickly as you can. Everybody wants it, and yeah, I think that especially now, especially a place like this, New York City, establish community.
Right. Right. I mean, again, there's a reason why, there's 3,500 to 4,000 coffee shops, and so many of them, sometimes by misfortune, sometimes by variables that we don't know about, but a grand portion of them ended up closing during the
Yeah.
pandemic. But yours was able to thrive. I think a lot of that had to do with the community aspect and how hard to create a sense of community when we can't even interact with each other in certain scenarios during the pandemic. So that seems like it's very much worked for Joe Coffee. Amaris, what about you?
I'm not the. This is where truly Jonathan's expertise would shine, but I know at least in my experience working, for so long at Joe, but also in food for a long time. I mean, I've been working in coffee specifically since like the early 2000s, so like almost the whole time the specialty coffee industry's been alive. But like in food service, even when I was younger, for a long time. I think the main thing that I would say is like I think it might feel like easy to choose to work with people who have complementary skill sets to you. Like, oh, this person's a creative, this person's good at the finance or whatever. But like, I think what's more important is like healthy communication. Maybe that is sort of like the emotional intelligence thing that we were talking about earlier. Like, you can't teach that. You can't really teach people how to do that well. So finding out what's important to you and how to express it, choosing to work with other people, whether that's who you're hiring or who you're going into business with as partners. I've seen so many of my friends start businesses and fail because they end up having like some big blow up or like they can't communicate or whatever it is. Like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day who has like what skill sets. Like, if you can't talk to each other, your business is really gonna fail. And I watched a lot of Kitchen Nightmares, but that's just like I think that's the truth. And I've had a lot of friends who are so talented, like super talented people who end up having like failed businesses because they end up like just not being able to communicate well with their business partners.
So the primary thing is to find complementary skills and tendencies, and the second is to be able to communicate it. I think those two are paired so well because if if you can communicate well, but you all have the same skill, then you're kind of susceptible to a
Yeah.
difficulty. It's like when an immune system doesn't have a lot of heterogeneity to it, it's more vulnerable to illnesses. And
Yeah.
so, do you find that is like extremely important that they must definitely fulfill like entirely different components from one another?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen friends like they started a business together and then they kind of like split and only one of them runs it now and is like kind of lost their footing, or like people who've like gone into business with someone and then like okay they kick them out of the business and then had to invite new partners and then that's not going well and then like I've just seen that happen several times. Jonathan, probably you have too, but like I just feel like yeah, obviously, yeah, you need people who can do different parts of the work,
Mhm.
but that to me that's not even as important as like being able to communicate well.
Yeah. There was a book that came out, I think somewhere around 2005. I really wish I remember the name of it, but they basically had different color hats as representations of essentially personality. We'll call them archetypes for business, and a successful business
Oh yeah,
ought to have all the
yeah. I
different.
think I read
Do,
that.
do you remember the
Yeah, the
title?
archetypes. Mm, no, but I do remember reading about archetypes because like Johnny and I even talked to one of our coworkers like a couple of years ago, being like, "Hey, we have really small teams. Like you can't just hire the same person over and over again, but you can maybe say like, okay, this person has this like set of skills. Like, okay, then we need maybe to hire like someone who has this complementary set of skills because yeah, you need like a couple like on a very small team especially.
It was
Yeah,
it
you need
was
that. But yeah, I remember we referenced that book.
it was Edward de Bono's Six Thinking Hats. I just pulled it up.
hmm
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah, and the idea again is that there's these different sort of personality. It's not just personality; it's just like what they sort of represent, and they ought to you ought to have all of these for a not just this. They have to communicate obviously for the synergy, but they cover a good amount of ground. That's not a coffee pun, by the way. Cover a good amount of ground for what a business would have to endure.
Yeah, but it's also a little bit like a marriage. I think if you're going into business with somebody or like you're working with someone for a really long time, like you do also need to be able to like talk openly and honestly or like I don't know, whatever it means to like slice through and connect on that emotional level to be able to communicate. I have friends who are like
Mhm.
in a business now and they're obviously like they've been unhappy for years and years and years and it's just like it feels like the equivalent of having a friend who's in a marriage that makes them unhappy. You know what I mean? Like
Right, right, yeah.
it's not cool.
Yeah, and I mean communication. It seems like that's one of the biggest factors, definitely, and that ties back into the emotional intelligence. A lot of emotional intelligence is not about understanding what someone else is going through or anything like that, but it's being able to recalibrate the message that you have in your heart into the language of the recipient, and into the language in which the recipient will really, really absorb it the way that you intend them to absorb it, and that takes patience, immense patience, especially if you are indeed talking to someone who's so different from you, which again, if you're having complementary skills, it's likely that you're very different people. To end, can I shout out two people at Joe's who have
Oh
helped me with
yeah.
so many
Please.
different things,
I love that.
including like how to word something, or if it's in my writing, or I would show them something in between when it's not rush hour. I would show them something along the lines of like a passage or a student's writing, and be like, well, do you think this would deserves a thesis point or no? I'm like, yeah, because of it. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. So and they're also just, they've been so sweet. And whenever I see them, it's just another reason in life to be happy that I get to see them routinely. And that's in the Long Island City. I was going to say chapter in the Long Island City. What would you call it? Branch or shop or
Location. Yeah.
Yeah, cafe.
location or cafe. Major shout out to both Rain and to Marty, because they
Mm.
they are fantastic people. They're just genuine people. And I've made so many friends. I've made at least 30 friends at
Whoa.
Joe's. Yeah.
Wow.
It's not like
Your
I
Sunday,
Wow.
your weekend, because like Marty's only weekend. I think Rain and Marty are only weekends, right?
Saturday
Yeah.
morning
Yeah, Saturday.
definitely
Yeah.
is yeah. And a lot of the yoga crowd leaves from Form and Flow to go to Joe's afterwards, because
Mm.
they've exercised their soul. Now they need to exercise their
Mm-hmm.
mind.
I
And
love it.
yeah, it's I don't know, it's awesome, and it's just great. It's fantastic, and I'm so happy that you all exist and that you exist so close to us. And I hope to see you both very soon there,
Mm.
and that
Aw.
you can see how busy it actually gets there, because I promise you, sometimes there's like 30, 40 people in that little shop, and we're talking to each other. I'm never online talking to people,
Yeah,
yet
yeah.
I'm talking to these individuals. That you've created an atmosphere that is enabling it. It's not like everyone's automatically talking to one another. It's just when someone's inviting, they turn to each other and like, oh, have I seen you here before? And then it just becomes a conversation, then becomes a friendship. One of my very close friends, Daruv, I met him at the Long Island City coffee shop, and through him we have exchanged at least a dozen friends each. So through you, it is through you that I have these friendships.
Whoa, that's amazing. I love that. That's so good. That's also so Joe.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's clearly a need. Yeah, love it.
We love hearing those. We on our 20th anniversary, we had like customers who came out of the woodwork that were like, "We met here and then we got married," or like, "We went on our first date here," or like, "I was a customer here when I was a student and now I have a teen son who's applying to work here." Like, we
Yeah,
have so many of those history moments. Don't I feel like I love that so much.
yeah.
Well, congratulations on establishing that. And thank you, both of you, for joining in the 15th episode of Interversal. And good night, and hopefully see you guys soon.
Thanks. You
That
too.
was
Have a
really
good
fun.
one.